and good morning. I'm so glad to see every one of you this morning, especially if we do have any visitors with us. We always encourage you to stay briefly, just a brief moment afterwards, so we can at least introduce ourselves to you and get to know you just a little bit better. Today's a good subject because no one really wants to argue against it. Today I want to talk about love, and not just the subject of love and what it is, and that's kind of really when it gets the crux of what I want to talk about today. It will not be love found on the movie screen, or even love that we have for a spouse, someone near and dear to us that maybe helps us better along the way. Maybe we have a lot of seminars and stuff about marriage and marriage seminars about the love between a husband and a wife. But today, truly evaluating yourself, myself, and then ask ourselves the question, how do we love others? And then by what standard do we measure that love and then distribute it? Because love is a very important subject. It's an important subject to really get. And if you don't get anything else in your life, if you do nothing else but just this, you've accomplished a great thing. Because it's probably one of the hardest things. I think it's easy. We think it's easy to love. We think that this should be not even questioning to even bring up in such a sermon. It is important. It's important us to get, and if we don't get anything else in life or strive for more than anything else in our life, the Lord wants us to get this one. He wants us to get this one right. And especially if we are a child of His, to really get this one, because He concludes that that's how everyone else is able to identify that we are one of His. It's how we love and how we love one another. So my question to start out with you, and maybe you'll evaluate yourself throughout this lesson, maybe you'll say, well, I've got that. Or maybe I'm working on that. Or maybe I don't even know what you're talking about. But we really need to at least get that as a minimum. Because for one, Paul says, if we don't have this one down right, if we have not loved, it profits us nothing. Nothing. No matter what it is. You can fill in the blank, and he fills in some incredible blanks we'll get to in a minute. It profits us nothing. Now, before we go to 1 Corinthians 13, and that's where we're going to go, and you can turn there for reference, where we're going to go and take a little bit closer look at. We need to put weddings out of your mind, even though I just put it up on the screen and now you're stuck with it. And now you're going to think about weddings the whole time. Told me not to think about that, and that's all you think about. Now, the reason I say that is because where do we hear 1 Corinthians 13? At weddings, almost all the time. A passage or the whole passage is always read. And we see that because in 1 Corinthians 13, read at the time, this more than any other time. So that's why I've crossed that out. Okay, blank that out for right now. You remember a couple be in front of each other with all of the smiles and gleams from each other, reciting their vows that I take you and you take me and I love you, and a passage is read from 1 Corinthians 13. We kind of dismiss that. It's kind of almost regulated. Well, that's the only time we read it. That's a shame, because there's a big point to get across other than weddings, and it's great to use, and I know everybody likes to gravitate towards that and maybe go to that first. And they may get up there and promise all kinds of things to cherish and put you above all else, which God is actually wanting with us. Our covenant with Him is kind of like that marriage. I take you, I'm your God, you're my people. I take you as a vow, I promise. If you promise, forsaking all others, sound familiar? It's really our promise to God. And love is patient, and love is kind. And if we're not careful, we can drift away from all that and lose the true meaning of such a great passage over the emotions and a joyous day that is delivered between a couple. But in the first part of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, he presents some things that if we could have in our lives. And I like the word if. It's not when you do this or when you're going to come across this. It is if. Who loves to play the if game? I do. If I was to win $1 million, ever play that game? Oh, I've distributed out. I'd buy a new house. I'd buy you a new house. I'd buy a car. I'd buy you a new car. If I was to have that. We all love it. We've done it since a child. If I was to have this. We love to think on those kind of things. Truly impossible things for the most part. And that's what he was driving it across, even if you got to this extreme. And that's the point. But he says that even if these extreme examples are often used even by Jesus when he says, even if you were to inherit the whole world. You can't even put that into I can't even put that into words. You can't. But even if you could get it all. Well, I have it all. No, if you could have it, entirely all and lose your soul, profits you nothing. We won't be able to concentrate on that because we can't really even know what a true living world value is. But he says, even if, to the impossible. And if it was not done out of love or have loved, and if we have not mastered that, it's like having all the money in the world and never doing a thing with it. In the end, it didn't mean a thing. And besides, you can't take it with you. No matter how special of a thing you have going on in your life, let's look at some before we get to the definition of the agape love that we're all trying to strive for. In verse 1, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers, let this sink in for a second, because none of us in here have prophetic powers. But if you had prophetic powers, and understood all mysteries and all knowledge. Well, that's just amping it up. You're giving me a whole plethora of stuff I could enjoy. And if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I have nothing. Have the gift of prophecy. That's being able to tell you that such and such will happen next week. Tell you for sure. On Wednesday, this is going to happen to you. And it happens. Spot on. How are you going to come back to and respond to me the next time you see me? Wow, you got something else for me? What's going to happen to me next week on Thursday? I'd love to know. I could plan. If you were to have that gift. But if you did not know how to love, how would you be able to flock to, all the people that would flock to us the next week to find out what would happen? A good talent and a good power to have, most would envy. Add the other, if I understood all mysteries. Isn't there still mysteries going on? Unsolved mysteries? We have unsolved murderers in this town. Unsolved mysteries. Who shot JFK? And I go off on those little tangents. We already know. Well, there's a mystery there. If I was to solve all of those for you, it'd be pretty impressive. Because there are some unsolved mysteries out there. And all the networks would be parked outside our door with live television cameras to see the next thing said. And I understood all of them, and I could explain all of the what ifs. Again, would be a great talent. And what about if I had all knowledge? Forget Google. You'd have me. Google is my friend. If he's not your friend, or Google is not a search engine for you, or maybe it's Yahoo or something else, you can type literally anything in there. And you're going to get some answers. In fact, it brags about how many responses it's going to be on that subject. I could just type in the word fish, and it would tell you how many things it would come up with the word fish or involving fish, how many of them are. And sometimes they're off the scale. Millions of searches that you could spend days, months, and years just on a search engine of searching something. Can you imagine? That's having what Google claims to have is really all knowledge. We live in the information age. It wants to dispense and distribute this information it has because it's collected it. So it is Google. But what if you were Google and you could literally, if someone could ask you something and immediately you could spout off the answer? That would be pretty impressive. Again, people would line up to see what we would have to say next. The internet is a great resource for everything, whether it's Surrey or Google or Yahoo. Forget all of those. I'm your information. Ask me anything. If you were to have such. Again, how many would want to flock to a person like that? And then add to it that they had faith even as small as a mustard seed, as pointed out by Jesus, and then could move mountains. Literally. And Jesus had told his disciples that if they had faith as small as that, as a mustard seed, there wouldn't be really anything that would stand in their way. We can't even get to mustard seed faith. I don't know where we are. We must be minuscule compared to that, because he says even if you had that amount, so what he's telling me is a little faith goes a long way, a mighty long way in God's perception. Nothing would stand in their way. They didn't have that kind of faith when he asked them and the disciples if they even had all of that. So there was a lot of what ifs in there. And what if? Well, we have to understand the what ifs, because that puts it in a perspective that none of us can really relate to, because none of us have that. But even if you were to have it and still miss the whole love thing, it doesn't matter. All the TV cameras in the world outside our doors to find out, it does not matter. It's zero. It's nothing if we have not loved. Meaning, we even don't get the simplest down of what we can control. See, none of those we can make have happen, but we can love. So what we can distribute and how we do it in verse 3 goes on to say that even if I was to give all that I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but I have not loved, I gain nothing. That is a big sacrifice too. So now I not only just talk a popularity contest of knowing and having all the information and having this great faith, but I sacrificed myself for you and had my body to be burned. Or if I've given everything that I had, every single thing except for the clothes on my back, or maybe even that too, and not got the simplest thing that we can control in our lives and dispense and distribute. It's nothing. That's pretty extreme, Paul. Now, if you were to give away all that you had right now, and you did that, you would probably make the evening news and be on the front page of the newspaper. That's probably guaranteed, because that would be shocking a lot of people. And then even if you were to give up your own body, that is powerful. But yet how often we miss what it's getting at, especially when it comes to applying it, and then turn around and then not do it, or even lift a finger. That's what Jesus was so mad about the Pharisees. He says, you put so much conditions on these people, and you won't even raise a finger to lift to help them, to aid them. You just want to bind them and control them. And then validating all along in our hearts that we are fine, and in our conclusions and justifications, we feel that we have done right in the sight of the Lord. We have to be more concerned about how we show and extend love, because it's only natural not to do these things. It's learned. So we talk from the very infant stages of we get everything we want from our parents, and we say, I cry and I get, and I cry and I get, and that's wonderful. And then we cry and we say, no, I get spanked or I get reprimanded, that I'm crying because I want something. And I'm told to grow up. I'm told to share. Share is a learned behavior. It's not natural. I'm selfish by nature. It's mine. That's what children will say in a nursery setting. It's mine. My toy. No, Johnny, let them play with it. You have another one. Oh, that's the worst news they could ever hear. Fall to pieces and cry. We know it's more learned than anything else, and we learn that not only from his words, but in his life. That one being Jesus Christ. Love is so hard to give up, because I may have been hurt before, and that's no fun. So I protect myself. I'm going to make sure that no one ever hurts me again. I've heard people say that. I agree. It is no fun. I have to guard against it, letting people in. They may take advantage of me. And that's just a little more safer thing to do. So love is given out by us how? Freely or more carefully? How it is distributed and how should it be given out is the question that we have to raise ourselves through the biblical teachings. Is it by God's standards? Or does that even come into play? Does that enter our mind is the question. Jesus pointed out to the Pharisees, if you love those who love you, what good is it? In Matthew 5 and in Luke 6, both point out from the words of Jesus. I like how it's paraphrased in this way. If you love only those who love you back, what kind of love is that? That's great. What kind of love is that? Pretty easy. It's not challenging. Well, the quick answer is it's very conditional. What Jesus wants for us to truly get and exercise in our lives is this. I want you to love how I have loved you. John 13 and 34 says. because he calls it, interestingly, a new commandment I give you. Now, when he says a new commandment, they must have been on the edge of their seat. Oh, what is this going to be? We're full of commandments. We had the 10, then we have all the other ones. Maybe we have hundreds of them we have to follow. And he's going to give us a new one? What is it? What could it be? Jesus told them, love one another. Now, that wasn't the new commandment because they had heard that before. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it to it, love your neighbor as yourself. They knew that. The new part that they heard, or what they were supposed to get, was how. And that was shown by Jesus himself. I want you to love one another, but I want you to love how I have loved you. That's a big difference in the comparisons of the love department. And why he pointed out the conditional way of loving that they knew and were showing all of their lives more than what they weren't doing. Because when it comes to reality, he loved me when I didn't love him. He loved me before I came to loving him. He loved me even though I wasn't very lovable. Is that how he loves? Yes, he loves the unlovable. So in turn, do I love the unlovable? Do I love you before you love me? Or do I have to wait for you to love me to love you back? See, that's what we're getting at. See, that love that he's giving is for me. It's true. But what we're really saying is I don't want to extend that to anyone else because I'm the most important. I'm not putting down Dan Mullins. He's the center of the universe, but we all think that we are the center of the universe. I'm it. The sun and the moon, they revolve around me. Sometimes we feel like that. I like me. God did that for me. And he did. And I'm special, and you are. But in reality, he did that for everyone, the person next to you, the aisle across, including you. But he did not exclude, which they were so often doing. So Paul gives us some ways to know if we are loving God as shown. Verse 4 out of this text. Love is patient and kind. Many of us get stuck on number 4. Forget moving on. We can't get much further because our patience are at its lowest. We don't have much patience. And you know what? Some of that is conditional. They tell me that the faster things get, when things get slow, we get impatient. Well, internet is the one thing. Remember the old dial-up internet? You had to hear it go, and you made it some gurgling sounds, and you said, oh, I'm connected to the internet, and it was slow. And then you had high-speed internet. Now you go back the other way and see how happy you are. This thing is still trying to load a picture. It's taken 10 minutes. I don't want any part of it. The drive-through, or bragging up, we can get you through the line in less than a minute, minute and a half, or whatever their goal is. And then when it's 3 minutes, how are we feeling? See, we're conditioned. Everything is faster and faster and faster. And then when things slow, the world got up in a fast pace. So patience is hard. And then kindness. Do we show as much kindness today? See, I don't like to hear stories like this, but I think it's good for our review so we can possibly learn from it. The other day, someone had asked, what is happening in the church today? And a couple of stories were relayed that we don't show much love and patience. Two of the stories that were given to me in actual stories and not here and not even really in our community, but the question is what happened in the Church of Christ. And it was just kind of an impatient thing, and it was a person that was working in a bakery, and he was a young man that they had been studying with, and he was so excited that he baked a cake and he brought it to church, and he wanted to share that with all of the other participants of the church. Until someone tapped him on the shoulder and says, "We don't do that here. We don't eat cake." And even though something could have been done, maybe we could have brought it here at the Student Learning Center and made an announcement. We could maybe have a teaching tool. There was none. And that person never came back. Never came back because of how they felt. And they were just excited. And another young lady that was just recently responded to the gospel. And she was so excited to be able to share that. And she came to the church as an obedient child of God. And she made a comment with an amen or an amen after, like Jack does often, and we appreciate that. Something vocal. Another tap on the shoulder of this young lady. We don't do that here. No expression at all. She's never been back. See, I mean, we have a big responsibility in front of us with everyone, not just us. And yet it's sad to hear these, but these were not new converts. Where is our patience anymore when we live in such an impatient world that we show we have less and less of it? So if I'm not patient, I'm not loving. And if I'm impatient, then it's something I need to work on and not keep excusing. And if I'm not kind or show kindness to even to the least of them, he illustrated the kindness showed in the Good Samaritan of all the people to stop and show kindness when the priest and the one from the Levi tribe where the priests come from never lifted a finger to help. In fact, went on the other side of the street to step over the situation, to remove themselves from anything. That's why a Samaritan came in. That was no accident. Samaritans and Samaritans were looked down upon by Jews. They were half-breeds, really. They weren't really children of God. In fact, they really didn't believe that they had any way of making it into heaven. That's the Jews' viewpoint of someone. Why do you think God used Samaritans so many times as examples? Because the other ones weren't doing it. And then Jesus says, when you've done this to the least of them, you've done it to me. So the question for you and I to raise is, who is your least? Because there's going to be someone on that list that you have beneath you. Oh, no, I don't have anybody. Yes, there is. That's someone you feel that you can't help or won't help or go to the other side of the street for. There is someone that's the least of them, and that's who we have to work on. I have mine. You have yours. None of us have got this perfected. Do we believe him in any of this or not? Do we take him at his word or not interesting enough that Jesus loved us and asked for us to love like he did? Even put his own reputation on the line as he went to Matthew's house, a tax collector. I've used this illustration before, and I've borrowed this from someone else, but I think it's so good to point out. Jesus could have said, you know what, Matthew, I want you to be a follower of mine, but we're going to do this behind closed doors, and you're going to follow me. I'm not going to your house because there's all kinds of people there that I don't want other people to have any confusion that I'm related to in any way because they're sinners and they're tax collectors. They're the least of them. He said, I'm coming to your house for dinner tonight. No, would you do that? Would you sacrifice your reputation? Oh, no, I can't do that. I've got an upstanding reputation to uphold. I can't show this kind of patience and kindness. And then he says, when you've done this to the least of them, you've done it to me. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. Again, what do we see in the world portray more of? We have to ask ourselves, are we more molding like the world? It says, do not be transformed by the world, but be ye transformed. Don't be conformed to the world, but ye transformed. Away from that. Don't be conformed to what we see and what we act like all the time. Are we more like the world in how we act? Or do we stand out as a difference, or do we blend in? Is there still envying among us? Any of us that arrogant or rude? It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. Again, in a world of resentment and irritability, everybody's kind of on edge, waiting to explode. I told my sons, and especially when we had an incident right outside our Arby's on Sheridan Road about some road rage, I said, if someone cuts you off track, just let it go. Don't try to engage in that. Someone wants a response. Irritability, just to set off in a moment's notice. That's not difference makers. And then steadfast, and then this, of insisting on my own way. Because Burger King told me I could. You can have it your way. Starts with that. What do you mean? I can have it my way. You're going to make this how I want it because I am king. It's just a subtle thing, and we kind of gravitate to her. Or maybe even what McDonald's used in years ago, because I deserve a break today. You say, you deserve a break today, so come to McDonald's because you deserve it. See what's catering to? Catering to you and your desires. Well, that's called commercialization, and that has bred and infected our lives, and then, of course, it spills over in your spiritual life in the church. What is your expectations when you came in here? Was it to edify and encourage someone else, or were you wanting to get something out of it, to have it your way? The singing better be good, and Keith was on key, so I'm glad. So that was helpful. And the preaching, well, you better not go too long, or you're going to hear about it. Just go nice and short, whatever the case may be, because I want it my way. Because I got to get out of here because I got to have a lunch plan or a nap. You get the idea. I like how the NIV puts it in this way in verse 5. It does not dishonor others when we sometimes can't wait to malign, put down, and totally do the opposite. Can't wait to get on the phone to dishonor others. Why? Because it makes me feel maybe a little bit better about myself because of my indeficiencies and possible inadequacies, in being inadequate. Love is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. And it keeps no record of wrongs. The last one is a kicker because that's all we tend to do is record keeping. We're very good at that. We do good keeping a record of wrongs. Why? So I can use it against the other person when I choose to. Remember what you did 6 months ago on the 13th at 9 a.m.? If you don't remember, I sure do. I got a record book. And I hold on to that. I keep it. Does not keep a record of wrongs, and we use it as ammunition when it should be another way of forgiving and not forgetting. We get so hung up on that. I've heard so many teams, we're supposed to forgive and forget. How can we forget? You're not supposed to, because God does one better for us, and this is how we're to extend it to others. When we have to truly strive to get to, it's forgiving and then not holding one accountable when we can. See? So that's really having a record of it, but I'm not using it as ammo. Not only holding them accountable, but this is the excellent part that Jesus does for us. Treat it like it never happened. Now, can you get to that point? I know you have your record book because I have mine. Okay, we all have our record book, but can I treat you, even though I know you've done this, can I treat you like you've never done it? We can't do that for the most part. They've done this to me. I'm leaving and I'm going outside this door. Or I'm not coming back until they make it right. Can we forgive like that? Can we get to loving people like Jesus did? Without the record of wrongs and holding them not really accountable when they should be, because we should be held accountable. See, when you reverse it, we don't like to hear those things. Well, do you want all of that given to you? Because it says, how you judge is how you will be judged, on what standard you give. If it's short without all the facts, then that's how you're going to get it. But you will claim that's not fair. You don't know everything. Well, you didn't want to know everything in this case. So what difference does it make when it's handed back to you? That's dangerous. And that's what God says will be extended to us. When we hold on to the wrongs and we're resentful, there is no way that we can treat them like it never happened because we can't let go. You see, it's in my nature to make them pay. I must get restitution for their wrong. But God says what? Vengeance is mine. Let me take care of that. I will handle that. You don't need to. But I certainly don't want God to hold me accountable, do I? No. See, that's when we would cry for mercy. Have mercy on me. Have grace extended. The forgiveness. We want that for us. Hard to push back out. Our loving, quite frankly, and I know you didn't want to get beat up on love this morning, but we all are going to. Our loving is shallow for the most part. We've got a long way to go. For the reasons stated. And before we get the justification on why, oh, Eric, if I could just sit you down, I could tell you why, and then you'd be convinced. No, I would not. Because our Lord and Savior, was he taken advantage of? Was he abused? And he says, if you're going to be a follower of mine, all of what's happened to me, you think you're going to get a pass? That's kind of what he said. You think the world's going to turn around and love you when they hated me and they despised me, and you all of a sudden think, oh, kumbaya, they're all just going to hold hands and love you for it? No. Think again. It's not going to happen. And before we get into our justification of why it's all about me and not about him, keeping a record of wrongs is fun. It's just as bad as Peter asking, how often must me forgive? You know what Peter is really saying is, how much should I really forgive person? Because I know I hold a record book, but I want to keep that record book because I can't wait. I'm almost excited to finalize the chapter, rip them out of my book and say, you're done. I'm done with you because the Lord says I could. That's really what he's saying. How many times must I forgive? And then we get all caught up in this number. This number thing is that you're not supposed to have a number. Oh, yeah, there's a number, and it's because this time, 70 times 7, I've got the number. Well, then good luck with that record book thing because, good luck on filling that up. You better go to Walmart and stack up on notebooks so you can fill them all up. Verse 6 says, he says, I don't want you to forgive like that. Verse 6 says, it does not rejoice at wrongdoing. So we're not going to rejoice at those things that are wrong, but we're also not going to just shout at the darkness either. That's wrong. The word will be able to dispense that out by itself, but rejoices with the truth. I'm going to stick with the truth, okay? But 7 is really where it gets to the crux of it all, because love bears how many things? One thing, two things. Thank you, Jack. All things. Love bears. I mean, if I have to bear something, it's going to put some weight on my shoulders. I'm going to have to bear this out. Grit and bear it. You ever hear that? Or just grin and bear it. Love bears all things. Believes how many things? Just a couple? All things. Hopes all things. That's thinking the best of you. I know I heard this, but you know what? I'm going to hope. I'm not going to go down that. I'm just going to hope for the best. Hope all things. That just sounds naive. That sounds like you're just going to get run over. Endures all things. Love never ends. If I must try to bear out all things with you, and you in turn with me, there's going to be some work involved. It's going through some stuff. I believe all things for the good. I believe in you. My hope is in that knowing, even though you will disappoint, even though I will disappoint, we can't help it. We're only human. But we keep striving for it anyway. Did Jesus get taken advantage of? Yes, he did. Did Jesus get his heart broken? He was betrayed from someone he loved. We always think, well, Judas, he's out. He's an outcast. He's bad. Yes, I understand that. He loved him. He was betrayed by someone he loved. Not, okay, Judas, I know I'm going to keep you kind of at bay because I know what you're going to do. I'm the Son of God. I know you're going to betray me anyway. No, he got in relation with him and was heartbroken over it. See, he could have said, I'm going to reserve myself. I'm not going to open myself to you because I know you're going to hurt me anyway. He did anyway. He keeps striving for it. Was he betrayed? Yes, we know he has. And then we have the best example of him following before we got to this point that we're in good company, as Jesus had the patience and the forgiveness and grace for us, but not to extend it, not to ever give it out. But you don't understand, they don't deserve it. And Jesus reminds us we don't deserve it. Love, when we get to endure all things, enduring is lasting through the toughness of it all. So let me ask, outside of your mom, your dad, your spouse, your children and grandchildren, any immediate family member, what is your grade if you were to give one on loving others on a scale of 1 to 10? And then secondly, which you can't answer, you may have a number in your own mind. What would others say your number were on the receiving end of what they feel your number is? I've been to a marriage thing once before, and we laughed at a video thing where the husband and wife were at kind of odds, and they asked him, he said, if you asked me what my marriage was, it was a 10 and a half. He asked her, she says, a 1. Maybe. Something's wrong, isn't it? It's perception. And before you say, well, I love everyone, as some kind of blanket statement, take anyone outside of your circle and see if you've displayed any of these traits and behaviors as we discussed to any of them with the patience and kindness, all of what is listed. I think most of us, myself included, would admit, I think we've got a ways to go, and maybe a long ways to go in this regard. But the question is, before you leave and just never think about it again, will you do it? And not because I said it, because the Lord has asked you. Will that make a difference? It's just getting past me is the problem. I just have to get past me. And then things start to work out. Why do you think it says, deny self, pick up your cross daily and follow me? Because you can't get past you. It's hard to do. It's the hard part. We are selfish by nature and impatient with everyone and arrogant. It's hard to follow the new commandment that was given us, to love one another as he loved us. How much did he love us? He died for us. Romans 5 tells us in the best way for mankind to understand. In verse 7, it says, very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. That's rarely. Someone will die for, oh man, you're a great righteous person. I would go to the ends for you. I'd die for you. Though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were yet still sinners, Christ died for us. You see, God didn't just come down here to talk about love and then turn around and say, I want you to do it because I said so. Instructing us on love. He didn't give us just a blueprint instruction of love. No, God himself, this verse says, demonstrated. That's in action. Demonstrated his own love. He put that love into action. He just didn't talk about it. He just didn't show up and talk about it. He did it all the way. So he's asking, are you willing to do the same? Because if we don't, our whole life, no matter what we fill in the what-ifs blanks that we were to get and achieve, at the end of our life, if we've not done any of those, it was like you lived a life of nothing. It measured up to a small obituary in the paper, some small good remarks at a funeral service, and the world knows you no longer. I want your and my legacy to go beyond that, by what we have shown. And that's what he says. They will know you by what? By your love and how you love one another. That's how they'll know. Not because of how much great Bible knowledge you have or how many verses you can quote. Are you doing it? If you need help in that, we'd love to help you with that. Maybe pray with you and for you. Maybe you've never obeyed the gospel and we don't want an opportunity to go unnoticed to say everything is ready, everything is prepared for this moment if that's your desire. Whatever your wish is, if you need to be brought up at this time, if you'll come now as we stand and as we sing.